We recently did. I've done two the balancing act little discussion series things, and I think in both of them I talked way too much. So hopefully that's not going to be a huge issue this time. But at the same time, they were both new. There was a lot of laying the groundwork kind of stuff, and yeah. So the first time we talked to a DD main, the Tech Geek, he's a streamer that said, "Hey, I'd love to have a chat with you about this." And I think we hit some points, and people enjoyed that discussion. It was meandering, but frankly, I have a little bit of ADD, so it's going to happen. The second one that we had was with a Razor, who I actually knew from a Twitch stream of definitely Knock a CV main, who is a big CV dude over in Europe, and also from the North American forums, where whenever I said anything about a carrier, he immediately decided to tell me that I was wrong and completely incorrect for thinking it. So it just like, dude, why don't you just come on, and that way you can tell me that I'm wrong in voice chat, and we don't have to like posture on a forum or whatever. It'll just be easier. So that's what we did. He had his views, I had mine. We did like a long 3 hour kind of back and forthy thing, and it was a lot of fun. But again, I talked too much. So while we were doing that, Zornbringers was listening, and there were some things that I guess he was thinking, I just maybe that works for him, but maybe it doesn't work for me, or maybe he had a different take on it. So Zornbringer has taught me quite a bit actually about the Graf Zeppelin, which was a CV I underperformed in. And like the drive-by aspect, the using the speed to make strafing runs kind of things with the torps and bombs was extremely helpful for me. So he has some CVs that he's really put a lot of time and effort into, and then I think there are other lines that he hasn't really figured out yet. So he's still in that whole learning the CV experience. So I thought it would be cool because not only did he want to have some counterpoint kind of stuff or some conversation stuff, but he is more of like a middle tier CV player. He's like 2000 PR in some CVs. He's learned in some other CVs. So it'll give us the perspective not from, a god tier looking down at the game mechanics and how we've decoded everything already. It's just more of an average dude trying to say, these are what I'm dealing with. These are my troubles. This is what's going on. So with all that huge ass intro that I just did, welcome
Yeah.
to the balancing act, Zornbringer, with a silent Z at the end. How are you
Yeah,
today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me. And I have to admit, I'm a great fan of your stream. I really like it, and I really like the discussions you had with the other guys. And
Woot!
listening to it, felt I had some points where I agreed, some points where I disagreed, and um, also some points that come maybe from different games and from esport in general. Um, and I had a whole bunch of ideas and points I wanted to talk about, and I'm surprised and I'm quite happy to talk with you about it because you're a really knowledgeable guy. I think we agree on a few things, and there are maybe some things where we have a different perspective, but
Well, it would be fun if we
I
agreed on everything.
that would be too easy, wouldn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I consider myself just a learning or a noob. I started playing 4 months ago. Started with the German DD line, played it to 10 um, because I like the hard stuff, and I sucked at it. Then I played the Japanese DDs and a little bit of other stuff, and I think the Japanese torp boats were my second line, where I got to like 8 or 9, and the gunboats also to 8 or 9 or 10 even before I started playing CVs. And what always struck me as something I noticed is that people complaining about CVs was not something I experienced in my day-to-day games as a destroyer. I felt that yes, CVs are annoying and sometimes they are strong, but they are not the reason why I lose game or I lose games. So um, it felt a little bit weird to have a different um, playing experience than what everybody else was
So let me.
loudly talking about
So
or
just to
whining
recap this.
about.
So you
Yeah,
kind of started out. I assume you picked German because you're German, just like I
yeah,
picked
I
U.S.
know
because
the
I'm
ships, so
U.S.
I was like, oh, cool
Yeah.
history, and let's play a little bit.
And you started out mostly with DDs, and I
Yep.
mean, going across doing the thing, you're going to run across carriers, and you
Yep.
never seemed to have an experience that really lined up with what you saw in forums. Yes?
No, and when I got killed, it was because I left smoke too early. I was playing torp boats with without smoke, but with torpedo reload booster,
Mm-hmm.
and most of the time I felt, or being totally alone in the open water somewhere, and I felt it wasn't because of the CV, but of the way either the game is designed or it was my mistake. But it was never. I felt never that CVs are overly broken and powerful. I do have strong resentment against radar and hydro, though,
Hmm.
uh,
Sure.
especially radaring through stone and islands and stuff. But
Yeah, that's. I don't think you're alone in that. I think I've heard that
yeah,
from lots and lots of people. But, eh. Okay, so after you did some DDing, I guess you heard people kind of talking about this stuff. When did you pick up carriers? When did you start on that path?
I think I started with the release of the German carrier line, and I played a few weeks or even a month before. I played the Japanese line,
Hmm.
210. I think the Hakuryu was my second or third, my second tier 10 ship, and of course my stats on those ships reflect this. They're abysmal, and I learned on the Japanese CV. I
Sure.
think I bought the Kraft Zeppelin for the Iron Cross camo. You had to have, I think, one
Oh,
premium
okay.
ship.
Yeah, yeah, that got me too. That actually got me to dive deeper in the wallet than I wanted to get the effing Parzival cuz like it was the last holdout that I couldn't finish cuz I just wanted to get the stupid tier 10 camo even though it like I paid way
Yeah, I
more to
guess.
get it than I could have just bought the stupid perma camo, but you
Yeah, I
know,
guess what ship I bought the camo for? The Z-52. I'm so stupid. Don't at me. That was a mistake. Um, so after the Japanese, I played the German line. Um, I learned. I basically learned on the Kraft Zeppelin. I played it a lot. And it took like 100 or 150 games till I figured this ship out, or reasonably understood how to play it. Let me
can
put it this way.
confirm Graf Zeppelin weird ship.
Yeah, weird but fun. It's not very strong, but it has some really nice things going for it, and I'm quite happy to see what the new captains will bring for the Zeppelin.
Yeah, so the Graf Zeppelin, when she was initially, well, I guess she existed before the rework, but she was one of the few premium CVs that was released at the beginning of the rework. And I guess they spent a little time tinkering, but eventually they just kind of finalized it and let it be what it is. The Graf has excellent secondaries, some of the best secondaries in the game. And as a result of that, a lot of power got pulled out of her planes. So if you try to use the planes in kind of a traditional sense, like you might with the tech tree lines, you usually just lose planes and feel miserable. Um, and I guess, since it is so speed focused, Zornbringer was able to, figure out some speedy strafing runs with the torps, also with the bombs. I think you told me that you could ride low with the bombs because they have so much penetration. You could like pen a Yamato, tier 10s and stuff through the sidewalls. So I started trying that out, which kind of blew my mind, but I mean, hey, it worked. Um, so I do have to ask, since you started with Germans and then you moved to Japanese, have you ever been in a situation where you felt like you could dominate destroyers on the map, or have you just never felt like you had that as an opportunity?
Um, I started with the Japanese and then played the Germans.
Oh,
And
okay. I'm sorry.
at that point, I was aware that the German line isn't exactly a DD destroyer, but more a cruiser and um, battleship hunter. And you only have torps.
Hmm.
I mean, it's nice if you can land them, but they're unreliable at best,
Yeah.
or just like mediocre. They're not like HVR or Tiny Tims or whatever you want to use on other ships or other CVs. Um, I felt I could dominate or at least force a smoke out of most DDs, and that's basically what I would try to do. Um, when he's around, surrounded by your friends, and he's smoking, and you got a radar, I mean, you can hunt a DD, but it's not like you got the Excalibur, just you wield it and you kill every DD in sight. I think
Sure.
that's not the
Yeah,
that's
that's
it's a
definitely not.
mistake of the DD and not your merit.
It's definitely not a hallmark of the line. The Japanese line also, it can affect DDs with the rockets, but the rockets are not super maneuverable. There's some people that, that they can really guess, line up the shots and stuff and really make it work out for them. But the planes are not designed to like be hyper maneuverable to really exploit, take care of DDs. So,
Yeah, and
um,
if the DD is next to a cruiser or any ship with good AA, it costs you a lot of planes just to get a shot off. And
So that
I'm
so that kind of leads me to the next part. One of the things, because we spoke briefly earlier today before this happening, and you were saying that one of the things, like when I was talking with a Razor, he he was very knowledgeable about the topic. So if the question came up, he could summarize it in a sentence and give it a good yes or no, and pretty much have really, from a high level perspective, given you a high level, this is good, this is not good. And I think you were saying that when you were listening to this, you were feeling like there's just more to it that maybe isn't being said. Something like that. We had a brief
yeah.
conversation before that. So in regards to AA, do you have any thoughts on that? Any differences? What is AA to you? How do you see it in the game? How does it feel to you right now?
Um, okay, I agree with him that it's a very simple system. So if you fly somewhere, you take damage and that's it. And I agree also with you. You said, well, it's a mini game like dodging flak or turning in to avoid flak is like a kind of mini game. And I see the point that it would overwhelm you as a surface ship if there was a mini game for you, like aiming or doing anything else than activating your priority sector or using a cooldown or something. Um, and to be honest, I don't have a perfect solution, but I think that the current system is okay-ish for the game as it is. Um, and maybe that's because I'm coming from a different perspective or from a um, very short time in the game. So I'm not a beta tester and I haven't played 5 years and I haven't been through all the different iterations. And
Sure.
I'm definitely not on the level to go, well, you just have to aim for the side belt armor, upper armor, and there's only 30 mil and you can penetrate that. And I'm definitely not on that kind of level, but I do watch a lot of other esport and I'm pretty knowledgeable about Dota. And I feel that World of Warships is a great game. I really like to play it, but it could use some elements and maybe some ideas from other esport games, especially again regarding balancing and um, the use of resources. And I'm coming from, I mean, I think your podcast was it the weekend after COTS Euro, or was it the same, or was it a few days before? I don't remember, but I watched the European King of the Sea tournament, and I felt people are not seeing um, the big picture. I mean, people are complaining about CVs being broken when there are 7 Petropavlovsk in every game and 4 Kremlins, and the game itself became really static. And I feel, and I still would argue for that being a way bigger problem than how AA works and whether you need another mini game inside the mini game or whether AA is too strong or too weak. So um, I think there are bigger fish to fry and bigger issues to tackle before you start that. And that is something to go back to the beginning. I think that is something that a lot of older players have this. Back in the day, everything was better and everything was great, and then
Yeah.
VG changed everything, and CVs are a big threat and stupid and too easy and too complicated and too strong and whatnot. And I thought a lot about it, and I figured that even talking about, for example, balancing or the different skill levels and the different game modes, it's first of all not an easy task, and second of all, I think most people don't even think about the implications of different game modes and different number of players in a team and all the other things. And yeah,
Yeah,
so
that's actually I happen
many
to
things to talk about.
yeah, I happen to know on the topic that you were just touching on with different game modes and stuff like that. League of Legends, which is a pretty popular game, is designed around 5v5. You know, 5 players on each team interactions. It's designed that way for how much damage is going to be kicked out, for the cooldowns, and how long until you have a new thing to use. Like it's really balanced around a single concept of this 5v5 gameplay. And then they had a 3v3 version. Well, some of the cooldowns were fast enough that they were really aggressively useful in 3v3, but they were, whereas they were kind of more, they helped, but they didn't dominate in 5 because they just didn't output enough, whereas they did against 3 players. So, like, I do have to say that it is definitely, it's a different world when you start making something for this and then suddenly also have to slot the pieces into that and this over here and the something else. And there was a podcast by TNG where Synpax and Bogsy were able to talk with Sub Octavian, who is one of the head honchos as far as where the game is moving, what's happening with the game, and he had explained that wargaming is really reticent to try at inventing new game mechanics for different modes. So like if the ranked mode has just a different way of ships interacting with each other, then people have to kind of learn that all over again. And that's just it's a lot to expect. It's a lot to put on people to be in a different environment and relearn so much. So it is very hard to kind of balance across that. Although, a lot I do see often on the forums and stuff, people will say, well, how about in ranked mode, there's a radar-like reveal for the CV. It's not actually showing it to the other ships, but it's appearing on the mini-map. And Sub Octavian's response is, well, if we do that in this mode, but not in that mode, how do you reasonably expect the average person to just, know all this crap? They learn a way to play a thing, and then it just changes on them. I mean, Halloween modes and the silly stuff where it's, your demons in space and whatever, I think everybody can realize that's just going to be different and let it be what it is. But when you
Yeah, and
start,
having pew pew sounds and not
yeah,
gun sounds and whatever. It's okay. It's nice.
yeah, when you've got something that looks the same, feels the same, but is different, that gets people really messed up. So to
Yeah,
go,
you mentioning League of Legends. I watched Dota for 6-7 years, quite a lot, and Dota is basically um, the
yeah,
same
League
principle and the
League
same
League stole
game.
the concept from Dota.
Yeah.
So they cloned it, they made it their own. They're similar but different games. They have
Uh,
very different visual styles, but yeah,
yeah, and what Dota does really good and really well is the balancing part, and that's something we might want to talk about. And maybe our viewers and listeners also play this game, but um, Dota, I mean, balancing is always a journey and not like a state where you can say like you're done. So balancing is, I think, a process that runs a long time, and you're tweaking, and little tweaks have maybe bigger implications than others, and so on. So it's basically a really difficult task to balance a game well. And what Dota does is, or what Dota did, was focusing on the, I'd say, on the highest level, on the point 0.001%, like the
Yeah,
world class
the
kind of players,
professional. Yeah.
the professionals. It has a huge esport scene. It has a lot of money in it, just like League of Legends has a lot of money at it. And Dota has a really good balancing in so far as they have 115 heroes right now, I think. And usually on the big tourneys, maybe 98% of all the heroes get picked at least once.
Yeah, that's pretty
So
excellent. League is much more restricted.
yeah, and I spoke with some league watchers, and they said like, well, maybe at most half of the heroes are playable, and the other half is just garbage. And there are heroes that are way better, and um, same would be here. There are ships that are better in every aspect than
But
one
but
ship, and they
doesn't
have no
but
redeeming
doesn't
factor whatsoever.
doesn't Dota have bans?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, so
they have.
Dota and League of Legends both have bans. So in so to tie this over to World of Warships, you know, there have been people that have been playing clan battles for years, and hopefully we can get somebody who has that years of competitive clan battle experience to come on here, because I'd really like to have a conversation about that and learn about it, because I don't have those years of experience. I only have
Yeah,
basically 2 seasons at a hurricane level, and after that, I derped around at Storm. Meh. I mean, it was just completely. It was chaos and just trying to make plays if we could or something. So having bans means you're enforcing variance on the game. So
yeah,
the fact that somebody could go out and go, we want to do this. They could run all the numbers, run all the math, run all the everything, and figure out this is the optimal configuration. And then that's what they use, which is what we saw over in Europe, where people brought shitloads of a ship that is very resilient to damage. They knew what its weaknesses were. Its weaknesses are being flanked, its weaknesses are whatever. So they shored the weaknesses. They put it in places where it wasn't weak. So they took something aggressively strong that had actual flaws, but they put it in such a way that it almost negates the flaws. So there almost is no flaw, and they just exploited the fuck out of it.
yeah.
So
And I was
having bans
disgusted.
in North America, we got rid of, just the spam of it. Whereas in EU, without the bans, you just see that. And just to tie it back to Dota, when you start having bans, you start having to think, well, if we do this strategy, we want this. But if they ban this guy, then that kind of collapses the strategy. So we need to have 2 or 3 or 4 different types of things that we can pull out of our back pocket. And then you start getting a really large, diverse pool. And without having bans for the ships, like you're not enforcing variance. And also the one other thing I'd like to mention is Petros are weak to flanks. If you're in a situation where you use rocks and teammates to guard your flanks, you don't get flanked. Not until like the late game when people are dead, which is one of the
Yeah,
reasons why I personally like CVs, because carriers add another flank, which gives you another way to exploit something which is otherwise very, very strong.
yeah. And
And
one,
enforces variance, which is good, I think.
yeah, and I agree on the variance part. So Dota has picks and bans, and you cannot compare it one to one, because the different heroes have different abilities and they interact, and some are really good with each other and some don't help each other at all. But um, as I said, they balance the game for
For
the
the
world
pro.
elite, for the best players ever.
Mm-hmm.
And this has really strong implications for everybody else, because in the pub scene, or in the, like in the random world, to speak in World of Warship terms, um, there are ships and heroes that are picked with just, they have really low win rates, and they are just picked every now and then, and they are really comfort picks and really easy to play heroes. And as you progress further to the higher levels, you see there's a shift between the kind of heroes or the kind of ships that would be played on that level to, let's say, the potato bracket.
Sure.
um, I am part of, or was part of, or whatever. So you would see changes, and there are heroes that are not viable in lower levels because they need teamwork and communication, and even a higher amount of
Raw
manual skill,
skill. Yeah.
of raw skill and game knowledge. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, there are heroes that can copy or steal spells, and if you don't know what they do, the spells, and why steal them? Because you cannot use them right. So,
That's true. Yeah.
so they require a huge knowledge of the game as well. And what I thought of was, why don't we play the game like this in World of Warships? What would be the implications? And I would love to talk um, to a really good gamer, a pro gamer, or clan battle player, or whatever, what he thinks about this idea. So what would happen if you just had if you play a mode, let's say Highlander, so you can only pick a ship once, and you have a picking and banning phase, and if somebody picked the Des Moines, you cannot pick the Des Moines because it's gone. And if you don't want to play against CVs, well, you got bans to ban all the CVs if you're really, really serious about it. So,
I think you could do that, but well, in the absence of a pro gamer, you have me. So I mean, I've been in some hurricane battles, but I'm definitely not the best. How could they do that? They could have bans. One thing that they might do, rather than being able to ban out a class or something altogether, they might have something where you can pick a ship that you like. How do you put it? A non-ban. Like you can basically say this is a ship that it's in, it stays.
yeah.
So you might have one of those and 2 or 3 bans or something, because there are other games that have, you queue up for clan battles, you get into a situation, and then you can, do some picks or something, and then choose your lineup. World of Warships has not done that. I don't know if World of Tanks has done that either. So that might not be a wargaming kind of concept, but they could probably implement some kind of code that says you can't get duplicates, where you're not just spamming the same ship. That might be a thing. That
Even
would be.
if you have a player-run tournament where they just go. I mean,
Well,
there are
there.
2 things that I noticed. One is North America used bans, which I really liked because it really helped the game.
Yeah, it enforced a lot more diversity.
Yeah. There is a point-based system where you can bring 100 points worth of ships, and different ships have different point values, ranging from
Actually,
I think 7 to 13 on the DDs, and
I'm gonna go
there are
ahead.
better
I'm gonna
ships.
go ahead and pimp this out. But so Bogsy and I, we were asked if we could cast for, I think it's called MSI. I don't know exactly what the MSI stands for off the top of my head, but basically Gaishu, he runs kind of a little informal tournament amongst respected clans or something. Maybe people that did well in the previous clan battle season. I don't know how they're picked. Unfortunately, I don't have the background and the knowledge there. I just know that he runs it. And what they use is actually a point system. So they have sat down and attached a point value to all the tier 10 ships. The ones that are considered terrible have, a lower than normal point value. The ones that are considered best in class have a higher. And you can bring whatever you want. There's not a limit on battleships. There's not a limit on whatever. But you can pick your lineup off of this points list. And so that there is actually a community tournament which has come up with a concept like that. I know Wargaming historically, they've said, well, I'm gonna take a little bit of time to EVE Online, for anybody that's ever played that. EVE Online is a sandbox. Literally, it's just, here's your place to play, here's the rules, here's some stuff you can play with, make up your own shit. And that's what they do. And by and large, the wargaming formula for World of Tanks and also World of Warships is, go grab your toys and go in the sandbox and have fun. Do whatever you want to do. Like, there's not a penalty if you spin in a circle and suck. There's not a penalty if you never land a hit or a torp. There's not a penalty if you don't take caps, other than it results in a loss. And hell, maybe your other teammates carry you. Who knows? So their version of clan battles actually relies kind of heavily on that concept of, yes, the Hurricane players are going to do what Hurricane players do. They're going to min-max, and they're going to pick whatever they think gives them the most advantage. But a lot of the folks in Storm and kind of in the middle tiers are going to pick, the ship they like. And I'll try to make it work or something. and they're going to go in. And I remember because just 3 clan battle seasons ago, I was on, I think, TXT. I was in their thing at the time. And I did a little bit of shot calling, if you could call it that. But mostly it was just, we tried to make an intelligent guess as to where to put what. And then as the battle unfolded, it was trying to figure out the things that we could do to make us die the least. And it was awkward, it was random, it was whatever the hell was going to happen, but it was with some people that weren't, super, super, super competitive, so they didn't have all like the crazy picks. They had what they had, and you brought it. And Wargaming, from what I understand, is perfectly okay with that. And I don't see that changing, although it would be novel if they had an event or something where they did like they did a 12-person clan brawl, so they could do that. If they had an event where they had like you can only bring one type of, or no repeats, if they did that in a special event, kind of tried it out, saw how it felt, they might be able to work the code into the clan battle stuff, because they work in modifiers all the time. It could be a thing.
Yeah, but you wouldn't need, as far as I understand it, you wouldn't need VG's approval to play the game with external rules how you see fit.
No,
And,
you don't. You can play in training rooms and do whatever you want.
Yeah,
sure.
you can do. Yeah, exactly. You can do. We have in-house leagues, and we this is the rule set we play with, and take it or leave it. So other games have a probably have a interest to make their game appeal to more to viewers and less to people playing it. So this might also be a balancing, something to factor in balancing, having crowd pleasers. But besides that, I really would love to maybe ask Aishu himself or whoever does this kind of tournaments, what it would be a good idea. Let's say you have tier 9 and tier 10, only tech ships, tech tree ships. Each team has 2 bands, no duplicates. And then you just pick back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, and see and enforce variability and variation, and probably a more agile and more fast-paced gameplay this way.
Could happen.
And you also had a backup, so if somebody picks your Petropavlovsk and you feel like you really need a Russian heavy cruiser, yeah, you just pick up the Riga, and it's not as good as the Petropavlovsk, but it might does do the job.
Yeah,
and tier 9,
you
tier
have like
10
a
is not.
backup, I guess. Yeah, and there's a lot
Yeah,
of
and
there's a lot of novelty ships at tier 9 that they put out as premiums, like the Benham and stuff. It's a little off the beaten path, but it's kind of its own thing. I actually would like to see if they made a clan battle season where you could pick 9 or 10. I know most people would pick 10 because it has more health, more armor, more gun power, blah, 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 but it would still give you more options on the table, and that would be a little more surprising in general. So it'd be fun.
Yeah.
I don't know how many people would take advantage of it, but it would still be fun.
And I would argue that having a pick and ban phase would bring a little bit more strategy and thinking than just using a point list, or like I have to stress it again, like the abysmal EU cuts, where just bring 4 Petropavlovsk and 2 Des Moines and 2 Kremlins, lol, and just park them behind the island and lock everything down. It was really boring.
All right, so we're talking about what ships could we use to make what ships could we use to make tournaments and kind of esportish sort of stuff more interesting. Well, I was trying to think of this earlier in the day because you had mentioned that, and then I went to go get some food before we were going to do our talk. For me, when I cast COTS, granted I'm in North America, so we have the ban system. So I saw a bunch of different variants. I saw a lot of different DD usage. Yes, it was around maybe like a main 4 or 5 DDs in general, but still saw a variety of DDs. Saw a variety of cruisers. Battleships, I think there were maybe 3 or 4 of them, but still a healthy assortment. And I found several of the games, even the ones where, you've got the long staring contests, even those I found to be interesting. The only thing that I found that I really, really wanted from an esport kind of angle was a a time delay function, and the possibility of multiple camera angles. Those were the two things that I found that I really wanted. So, to reference League of Legends, you can spectate a game, and the game is delayed by like, I don't know, I'll make up a number here, a minute or a minute and a half
Yeah,
or something.
2 minutes.
2 minutes, cool. And they have a little like software or something that's running that if there's a big burst of damage somewhere, or somebody makes a lot of money really quickly, or there's a big monster kill, the camera just kind of like goes over there and focuses on that. And because it has that time lag, the camera can choose where it wants to go, and it can see what's the most interesting thing on the map by damage or by gold or by whatever. And
group movement and ship movement, or whatever.
And it's able to focus in on that. So it's like if we were doing any kind of if Warships was going to be an esport, you would need multiple camera angles and the ability to kind of have a delay on the stream where if something happened, you would still have the time to be able to switch to the camera angle that recorded it and covered it, so that you could display the action versus like, oh shit, something, and then try to swing the camera over there real quick. So that to me, I think that'd be a lot of effort and probably a lot of people involved doing the camera stuff. But it would, if they could integrate that somehow, that would just be amazing as far as presentation stuff goes. Because like for me, if you watch my stream, I'm all like zoomed out and stuff because I don't want to miss anything. So I zoom in a little and then I just immediately zoom back out. I don't do any action mode kind of stuff.
I am 100%. You're 100% on point. I totally agree that this would be great that you have in different camera angles and different. If something happens, let's say you get a citadel, you get like a close up of the ship receiving the citadel, or you see the shells flying and doing the citadel hit, or whatever. Like bringing a little bit more, a better viewability or better visual component to the game. But the point the point I was coming from was, and I think you agree, was damn, I wish we could play with CVs, because there are CVs that really punish slow Russian ships sitting still behind an island.
Yeah, there's okay. So
there's nothing else that can. Yeah.
Just for the audience, there's this idea in gaming that if you're not the best at something, you're terrible. And there's no in between. So, for instance, the Z-52 is considered to be a weak trash ship. Well, they gave it some more pen on its HE, so technically it can farm better. But it was considered to be terrible, not because it's terrible, but because it's a jack of all trades and master of none. It doesn't straight up win gunboat fights. There are better gunboats. It doesn't straight up win torp fights. There are better torp boats. It doesn't have the best detection. There are other things that have less detection than it does. Like there are a lot of but this, but this, but this, but that. And as was just said in chat, if you're not first, you're last. So what a competitive player will often do is, what is my role? My role is spotting. Then I have to pick the ship that is the best at spotting. And everything else matters if I get a chance to use it, but all I ever expect to do is spot. And then you have a lot of Russian ships. Why? Because they're incredibly tanky from the front. You control your position, so you put it in a position where you're only really going to get shot from the front, which means you're incredibly tanky because you just eliminated the weakness of the ship by positioning correctly. So now you have one of the strongest, tankiest ships in the game because you made it that way. Not because it doesn't have weaknesses, but because you overcame them. Well,
and you start great guns.
Yeah, and great guns.
And you have radar as well, so there's like you got to heal. So
yeah, it's a beautiful package. But if the Russian ships weren't there, there would be another version of the same thing that ends up being the best. There's always the best in terms of what you want to do. And one of the reasons why I personally like CVs in play, I've heard people say, clan battles are really stale because people take the same positions, doing the same thing with the same ships, blah, blah, blah. And again, I believe that the CV adds an aerial flank. So suddenly you have a ship that's weak to flanks, whether it means side shots or flanks from above. there are some ships that are hardened against, the aerial flank. They have fighter consumables. They have better citadel protection or deck spacing. So it's not like it doesn't exist. It's just that people prefer to deal with the surface ships on the map as opposed to the CV. And when you add the CV, fuck, now we have to make more trade-offs, and nobody likes trade-offs. I do think that factors into the position a lot.
I agree, and I think the play style, parking behind an island, and every side does it, is it's not very appealing. And what I felt from watching the King of the Sea tournament was that it was basically about baiting radar and parking behind islands. Just to be paraphrase it uh, really on point. And I agree that CVs would force different strategies, different tactics from you, because you cannot do this for a prolonged amount of time, or
Mm-hmm.
for forever. So you cannot park behind an island because you will get killed. And maybe we find some common ground with Eraser there, who said, well, plane loss doesn't matter. Um, so
Well,
how to put it?
speaking of that,
Yeah,
um, earlier on, before we kind of shifted off onto esports, there was a short kind of topic of AA. So I want to
yeah.
ask you a direct question. And then, I mean, the show is the balancing act, and I don't think we spend too much time really trying to figure out how to
Uh,
balance something. So we can derp around a little with the idea of AA balance. I have an idea, just a basic one. You give me a thought on that. So first off, the direct thing is, how is AA for you as a fairly middling player? Do you find that it's really hard to deal with? Do you find that you've kind of figured it out? Do you lose more planes than you want to? Do you spend many matches? Shit, I'm just deplaned. I can't do anything. Like, what is your experience with the current AA system as it is now?
aside from ships like FDR and Kaga, we, who are a special kind of ship, I struggled with plane loss in the beginning, um, but with I think with more game knowledge and more knowledge of what to strike and what not to strike, and who had good AA and who doesn't, I'm pretty okay-ish. Pretty okay with it. I mean, there are sometimes there's sometimes the Haaland behind an island, and you're gonna lose your whole flight, and
Sure. Yeah.
this totally can, depending on it won't wreck you in 2 minutes in, but it will wreck you
Over time,
10
yeah.
minutes or 12 minutes in, right? If you lose 9 planes or 6 planes 9 minutes in or 10 minutes in, that's a big chunk of potential damage, because you can only do one run, or you cannot do a run at all, because your 3 or 4 planes will get killed before they reach the target. Um, so I would say that AA it's okay-ish. I don't think it's too strong. I don't think it's too weak. Um, I guess I'm at a point where I could make a decision of losing planes to get the last point of damage in, versus I pre-drop and I'm not gonna lose planes because I need them later. And that's something to the talk you had with Eraser. That's something that probably fell a little bit short. Is that in random, it's maybe a little bit different, and um, 7 versus 7 and 9 versus 9, or even 12 versus 12 is different, because they're all differently balanced, and people on clan battles and higher levels probably know what they do. And I think the game will or would change if all the ships capable of running a fighter plane run a fighter plane, versus Hydro, for example. And I think it would be a great idea for some ships to have them choose between radar and fighter plane, and not um, defensive AA and Hydro, for example.
Yeah, I think one thing they could do, which would absolutely be very, very helpful, is when you go into the match and you're in that section where you've got a minute before you click the start button, you can see the enemy team. I don't see why you can't just have a little like consumable bar, and you just, this is what I'm going against. Let me bring the hydro. Let me bring. Maybe I don't need radar in this. We have a lot of radar. I'll go with the fighter plane or whatever. I think most people would be scared to trade the radar for a fighter plane in general. But like still, when you see what you're up against, you can make an informed decision as opposed to just completely going in blind. And it can be super frustrating going in blind. So it would be really nice if they had like a little thing where you could switch just while the game is loading up. Once you're in the game, you're locked into whatever you got or something. But it would be really cool if you at least had that.
You keep your captain, but you can switch consumables, and you keep your modules probably.
Yeah,
So
I
you
mean that would
cannot
be.
switch your modules.
I'd be good with that. As for AA, I think what they could do without making it really mathy, but still make it feel intuitive, is they could increase the guaranteed damage some, kick it up 20-30% per ship, but start to have diminishing returns with overlap. So the first ship, say, is doing 130% of what the AA is we see now. The second ship kicks in with, 80% or 90% or something. So you're at 210% of what we are at now. The third one only chips in 60 or something. Basically, if you're taking hits from multiple ships, that as far as the player is concerned, you're just getting shot. You don't know. Nobody's staring at the bar actually calculating, I'm taking 254 damage per second. I should be taking 277. This is wrong.
Yeah.
Hell no. Nobody's doing that. So if you just on the back end make some kind of diminishing return so that you can bring up the defensive ability of a solo ship, but mitigate the overwhelming overlap of the multiple ships, even though by the time that they overlap, it's going to be just egregiously high anyway. And secondly, flak is a mini game, but flak can absolutely be a great way to let even newer players know, don't fuck with clusters of ships. So right now, flak, if you're against a single ship, there's puffs, they're flared out. You can maybe juke through little holes in the flak and get through and do your thing. Well, what if when you had multiple ships coming up, they almost had an increase in their flak, or the flak got more wallish or something? You made it so that it's more of a you shall not pass kind of concept. So even the average player, maybe they're not going to realize so much that the guaranteed damage is going up, but the wall of flak is just going to show, I can't fuck with this. There's 3 ships together. I can't do anything. And
what I feel about, okay,
I think it's a real feels bad moment when you're in a situation where you want to help and you can't. But to be fair, surface ships have feels bad moments when they're lit by planes and can't shoot the planes off. They have feels bad moments when, oh, I didn't know that guy was over there and I'm broadside. Oh God. Like everybody has feels bad moments. They're going to feel bad, but they're also going to feel good to a player on the opposite side. It's just making sure that it's not to such an egregious level that it's obnoxious as fuck. Still, I think they could, if they did some kind of diminishing returns, they could do that. And if you wanted to sacrifice board position by clumping up your ships in groups of 3 or something, they could make flak oppressive enough that it's basically a no-fly zone. It's like, nah, you need your surface ships to do something, or else, yeah. So you need to do something else right now.
Let me pick up on that. I think single flak is, you can dodge it. 2 ships is usually okay as well. But if there are 3 ships, sometimes you just lose all planes. And especially if you're lower tier, if you're playing an 8 in a 9 or 10 game. So there are situations where you go like, oh, that's my flight of 9 planes gone. And that's I don't get annoyed by it. I mean it is annoying, but I figure it's part of the game. What I thought of to make it a little bit more, to have a little bit more interaction with certain surface ship is if your secondaries are engaged on a battleship or on a cruiser. they cannot shoot flak. That means that if you strike a ship that is brawling with a ship of yours, you have significantly less AA because the secondary guns are shooting not flak but at the other ship. That
Sure.
could be probably, and you could even toggle it to go like, okay, always shoot, always air, always surface ship, auto mode or whatever, and it would also reward you as a CV player to strike targets that are engaged by your team.
I could go with that. That would add a little more complexity, which wargaming seems to have shown that it's not too crazy about, because that'd be a whole bunch of turn it off, turn it on, turn it off, gauging the
Yeah,
situation.
yeah,
So I don't know how that would work. I do want to say there are people that complain about, their AA mounts getting knocked out, so that toward the end of the game, the CV is crazy because you don't have as much AA and the planes are still kicking the crap out of you. Some people have said that AA mounts should be able to regen, get repaired over time or something. Wouldn't necessarily be against that. To me, like, armor is a way of mitigating incoming damage, and AA feels like it's a mitigating factor against planes. Yeah, you still get struck. Yes, you still get hurt, but it's what reduces the amount of follow-up strikes that you take. It's what forces the CV to take a shot, whether it wants to take the shot or not, because it's not going to be able to make a second pass if it chose to. Like, in a way, it's still aerial armor, and I think I do think if you change the secondary on-off function or whatever, you're kind of altering what it has in a fundamentally strange way. So I don't know about that.
yeah. So the way I see, to take a step back, the way I see CVs in this game is they have a global presence or a map-wide presence, which only DDs come close to because they are a little bit faster and can travel somewhere and have torps maybe.
Mm-hmm.
Um, CVs are they speed up the game, I feel, and that's something I would really have to have some data on because in Dota there are every game in the played on the each and every random game or normal game, there are detailed statistics about it, and you can do your own research, like finding hero combinations or win on pick rates and so on and so forth. But I feel that CVs are speed up the game. They are good for the game, and they decide a game at one point or another. So you have less stalemates and less games that are undecided in one way or the other than without a CV. That would be my hypothesis, and therefore they are good. And CVs, yeah,
So I do have a question for you. This is just a
yeah.
thought. I had this thought, oh God, probably 6, 7 months ago, really. But what would you feel if they added an indicator? So, like, if you look at the left or the right side of the map, there's like ship icons, that'll tell you these people are there. Obviously, mods replace those with health bars and stuff. But I think it would be nice if there was some kind of indicator next to the enemy ship on the icon or somewhere on there to let you know that the enemy CV has this many planes. Why I think that's important because it does affect people's decision making. I think that random players have no chance in hell of communicating how many torpedo bombers got shot down, how many rocket planes got shot down, how many whatevers got taken out, and especially like trying to think of what the regen rate would account for. So one of the things that I had in clan battles, my team would say the Hikaru, it just bombs me and I die. It just bombs me and I die. And it's like, well, are you
No.
doing the math on this? Well, he just bombs me all game and I'm dead. No, he bombs 3 times in a game and that's it. 4 if he takes the flight tech mod and he's really conservative with his planes. That's 3 attacks. 3. Not 10, not 20, 3. Maybe those attacks really hurt, but he gets 3. So over time, when I started showing them the math, had them experience it in a training room, they went, huh. And I really think that if there was some kind of indicator on the screen that told you, the enemy CV has 26 rockets, how many torps, how many bombs, and just basically as your team shoots down planes, you can just pretend that, whatever ship shot down 6 torpedo bombers radios to the rest of the team, hey, I killed 6 TBs, and somebody in like a little room somewhere with a chalkboard is just strikes off 6 of them. Like there's not a reason why that can't happen. So
you could do it really easily in the current mod where you just have a little lights like green, yellow, red for the different plane types, and as the game progresses,
yeah, you could do
and you
that
shoot
too. If you didn't
and
want
you
to
shoot.
give too much information, you could give like a generic color.
Yeah, if you lose, let's say the first third, you're in yellow, and if you lose the second third, and you have or like half the planes, you just have it in red, and you know that okay, he's red. That means um, he most likely can only strike once, if at all.
Yeah, he's got like
And
0 to 5 of these, and orange or
yeah, and
yellow is
maybe
like
maybe now
six
is the
to
time.
ten. Yeah,
Maybe now is the time to use my fighter and my defensive AA consumable to really neutralize torpedoes for the rest of the game. I think that would be a good idea.
I think in its own way, information is a balance, or sorry, information is balancing. Like it's a mitigating kind of thing. Just like if there was an indicator, for instance, that if you were against a torp boat, maybe the torp boat has an upgrade that lowers the reload time, or a commander skill that lowers the reload time. But even still, just if you had a mod that tracked when it saw torps and was able to tell you like this DD doesn't have torps for the next 30 seconds before he can shoot again, like that gives a player so much more understanding of what they can and cannot do in that moment. I want to say I'm not advocating for that in the case of a destroyer. Destroyers they require fear. So, sure, completely cool with destroyers doing destroyer stuff. Not trying to say that they need this. But I really think that when it comes to carriers, people don't know the numbers. They don't have the information. And just from a really basic idea of a ship shoots down 5 bombers or three rocket planes or something, they just radio it to the rest of the team. Hey, I killed 3 of these. And some little dude, just keeps track. I've considered asking, my team in clan battles to call what they kill, but I already know before I say that there's no way in hell it's going to happen. So I'm not going to fight that fight, but I would really like if the game gave you that basic information, even if it's just in the form of a color code. Blood red, absolutely out. Red, low. Yellow, middling. Green, or like dark green is full. Just something
Pristine. Yeah,
basic
he's
so
full.
people had a concept of what was going on. So as you lost planes, you could know the enemy carrier strike capability is lower, and you could even see what your carrier is at, which might
Yeah,
end up
it would give you
giving you
some
some
sort of
BM.
feedback. I mean, if you're a surface ship and you use your defensive AA, for example, and you get everybody goes like, "Hey, why are you using defensive AA and not hydro? Hydro is way better." And you go like, "Well, he went from orange to red, so no more top runs on you then." I think that would be a good addition. I could see that.
Okay, so we talked about some AA stuff. We talked about some possible kind of balancing whatever stuff. Yeah, knowing true battle damage is something you don't get in the real world, which is again why I think maybe the color coding would be better than the actual numbers, just because it would be more of a feel thing, But still, when people are convinced that the enemy CV has unlimited, endless death planes or whatever, if my team
Always.
in a competitive situation against a Hikaru knows that the enemy CV is low in bombs, well, then they can make decisions that they won't otherwise make because they're scared of bombs. And that's important because that's information that we actually could have on the team if people just communicated bombers coming, the 2 ships kick on their defensive fire, they kill 11 of them, and then you just say 11 bombers dead. And then somebody on the team keeps a rough mental tally of what a Hikaru probably has. Like, you could just do the math, But I think people are so not conditioned to thinking of the enemy CV as having a resource that they won't even try to do that. Whereas if you just put it in the game, it would be so much easier.
I think that's a funny observation. Um, people people have no problem, or they go like, oh well, I just got 2 citadels from a battleship 20 kilometers away while turning my cruiser. I'm okay with that. But they run, they go crazy when you hit them for 11k damage with your torps. They go like, CVs are evil and they're
Yeah.
bad. It's sometimes I think the feeling of being helpless and not knowing what to do against it, and even if you do something against it, you don't see having it impact. And having a color code would give you some sort of feedback that even if you take damage, and even if this damage might feel um, unavoidable to you, you still shot down some planes and you limit future strikes. So you still damage the CV in some way just by taking damage. And people are absolutely okay with it, playing, fighting against surface ships, going like, yeah, I take some shots, but I can turn, and then I'm in a better position. But they don't see this. They don't see and they don't experience the same fighting against CVs.
Well, Wadafox says, but if you did that, then what would you do to balance out the info that ships give out? Because information is power. You can't just leak CV's airplane info without leaking surface ship info. Well, that
Yes, you
is
could.
one of the things where games defy reality. Just because it would make sense that, well, if you're going to do this, then you should do that. I mean, that's being equal, right? Yeah, but you don't have to, not in a game situation. What you have to do is provide people with the tools to interact with the game and some kind of understanding of what's going on. And I think one of the biggest misunderstandings with CVs is that people just don't realize how much damage they're doing to a CV's quote unquote resource pool, because they don't know the ribbons, they don't share the information, they just see the planes and think, God damn it, there's a never-ending whatever of planes. So this is,
If you had
if we
if you
did
had
this, it would have two
if you had
purposes.
text combat log, it would be no problem to program that. Just have some mod or some program running in your background parsing the log and go like, okay, ship X lost 2 AA mounts, it's at 80% AA capacity, but the attacking CV lost 6 planes doing 15,000 damage or whatever, any kind of number you want to pick. So if you had a text log, this would be really, really easy, and other games have text logs where you just parse the information out
Yeah,
and
that's true.
use
Just
it
like
in any way possible.
damage meters for World of Warcraft, it just
Yeah.
reads the log. Yeah. As far as providing game knowledge of the ship's AA status, I mean, essentially, if you just look at the ship and it's half health, it's probably got its ass kicked a little, so it probably has less AA. If it's a quarter health, it's probably got its ass kicked a lot, so it probably has very little AA. I mean, there are context clues that you have when you're looking at a ship, especially when you look at its health bar, that you don't get when you see a CV. And because I think a lot of people don't have the information, they just genuinely believe that the CV is an immortal god that runs around Goomba stomping everybody. Now, in the case with a Razor, who we had on the last time, that may be more close to the truth than not, because he just goes around bitch slapping people, sure. But I think it was kind of like the whole reason why AA got changed in 8.5, where all the continuous damage got put into a single plane at a time, was because you had people in surface ships. I put 25,000 fucking damage into these planes, and none of these bitches died. What is this? Why is this happening? Well, I mean, I did the right thing. I used priority sector. I angled. I did this. I fucking lit them up. I spec'd for it. Jesus, what does it take to kill this shit? Not knowing that an additional 2,000 more damage would have killed 7 planes or something stupid. So when they enforced plane loss, then people got to know. Maybe they didn't think it was enough. God, I only killed 1 plane there. I only killed 3 planes there. Whatever. But it's still, you do a thing, you shoot at the planes die. So you do a thing and you get feedback. And I think an additional way of giving feedback without really neutering a CV's capability to do anything, just gives more information on what they've got, would be some kind of indicator that could give like a plain status, which I actually think I really think that would be pretty kickin' if they could do that. Okay, so
But expanding on
Mhm.
what we spoke about, I think that defines also CVs that I would argue that most ships, battleships and cruisers are linear, so they have the same fighting power more or less throughout the game, right?
Sure.
They can shoot every 10, 15, 30 seconds with all their guns or 2/3 of their guns or whatever, and it most likely stays the same. And their relative power is probably linear or like constant. And DDs and CVs, they are different. They are a little bit weaker in the beginning, but they get gradually stronger.
Yeah, as they have
And
less things to fend them off.
yeah, and DDs are, they get a little bit stronger, and they have, like as you said, they put fear into your enemy, so you cannot go there alone because you get torped. And CVs get more damage, and it would be a really interesting statistic to see from your total damage number in what time frame this is done. So you had a little graph showing you, okay, 2 minutes in he did 5,000. 4 minutes in he had 15,000, and 10 minutes in he had 80,000 or whatever. Right? You have probably some sort of curve going in. The further the game progresses, the more damage you do,
Mm-hmm.
even relatively speaking, in the time frame. And I think understanding this, understanding how DD works, um, is also contributing to the fact that people hate CVs, because in the end, of course, if you see a battleship with only half health and you have a full top plane flight as a Japanese, you're gonna kill the BB, right? Most likely, right? You can do 3 runs and you hit anything between 3 and 6 torps for a, let's say, 30,000, 35,000 points of damage, and that might be enough with the flood and whatnot. So, um, and this is the thing that people remember. They go like, "Oh, I took a lot of hits and I used my healing consumables and everything, but the CV killed me,"
Mm-hmm.
and they will remember that. And uh, yeah,
Yeah,
that's
it's tough to be flanked. I think in the last interview or the last discussion, sorry, I mentioned Overwatch, where they have a character, Farah, who has a rocket launcher, and she flies around in the sky. So the rocket launcher, it technically has a benefit by the fact that she's shooting down. So even if she misses, the explosion, can still affect somebody. But she's also limited in the fact that there's travel time on that rocket. So people can try to evade and move and be unpredictable and stuff. So it's not that she just has an angle that she can dominate from. There is counterplay to it per se. But the aerial flank can be really, really surprising. So, something like that where I don't know. It's really
yeah,
tough. It's really tough to deal with something, especially when you're overburdened or you're just too weak to fend it off. And it sucks to be
the
in that position, and it can cause a lot of resentment, I know. But that's one of the first things that I had to learn and hate, but then learn to appreciate about attrition based games. Where, like, if I play EVE Online and I spend hours and hours building a thing, and I'm happy that I've got my thing, I can literally take it out to do something and it gets blown up in 10 minutes. And all that time and effort I spent, just because somebody wanted to laugh, they just killed it. And all of my time and effort is gone. And it's incredibly frustrating, but at the same time, it makes you value what you have. And it gives you just kind of a different perspective that other games don't. Like in World of Warcraft, you never really lose anything. It's just an endless march toward progress and winning. This game does
yeah,
not
and a
give
lot
you
of
that.
inflation. Yeah, but they are different games. I mean, some games you have to accumulate experience and gold and whatever and levels. So you gain something, and this game turns it around, says you lose something. You're gonna lose health, and you're gonna lose points or not take points. And understanding this is crucial, and something that's probably not. It would be easier if it was the other way around.
Here's a semi-controversial question. Well, I don't know if it's controversial, but some people say that, again, attrition-based game, right? If you, they say that there should be a health loss to the hull of the carrier for every plane that dies. So, like, if you lose every plane you lose, maybe you lose 200 health off the hull. So if you lose 50 planes, that's okay, yay math. 10,000 health. You know, it might not be that the hull is going to sink, but that you're slowly bleeding the hull dry as well as the resources dry. Do you feel that
I
that would be something that you would hate, be okay with, be confused by? Like, what do you have any thoughts on that as a concept?
I would be confused by it, and I think it's a bad way to solve the diminishing resources a CV has. Right. So basically, what you do is, if you lose all your planes, the battleships only need 5 hits instead of 8 hits to kill you. Um,
Sure.
and if you're running to the edge of the map, they won't even find you till the end of the game.
Well,
Um,
okay,
except
sorry.
some CV snipes and stuff. So I don't like it. I think it's a unnecessary. I would argue it's an unnecessary
Here's the one thing about it that
loss.
I find interesting, because I don't personally, whether the CV loses 100 health or 1,000 health or something, like if you don't have the resources, you can't do that. You can't make the strike. So the idea that the loss of planes just isn't enough, I disagree with. Now, if the AA was stronger and you lost more planes, so you had less options or less, freedom to make your strikes, or maybe people were more defended against them, I'm sure that'd be a little different. Maybe they'd feel like the plane loss was enough. But there are people that feel like, I'm losing health, you're losing a regenerating resource, go fuck yourself. That's never going to be the same. So they want some kind of health included. And if you think about it, what would it do? So beginning of the match, midway starts with, I'm just going to make up numbers to keep it easy, 50,000 health. So if a CV wants to try to snipe the other CV, they have to go all the way across the map, and then they hit it for like 15k. And they have to do that 4 times. And they have to make sure that all the hits are good. So it's like you end up losing 7 to 8 minutes for the CV snipe. Well, if you had this health loss with the planes, they start, I don't know, cutting off sections of the hull to build more planes in the middle of battle or something. Um, if you
Repairing nanobots.
Yeah, repairing nanobots. If you had something like that, then maybe 5 minutes into the game, that 50,000 health CV might be down to 40,000 health. And maybe 8 to 10 minutes in the game, he's down to 30,000 health. And
So
it's not that
basically,
that's
the
such
whole
a
idea.
huge difference, but it means that as the game progresses and you use your resources, you start to bleed health on the hull to the point where you start getting into CV snipe territory, you start to get into focus fire territory, whereas if you were spotted, after 12 minutes into the battle and you're sitting at full 50,000 health with an armored deck, who really wants to fuck with that? But if you're spotted 12 minutes into the battle with 20,000 health and an armored deck, maybe that's something that you just start to light. You go over there with your planes, you keep the enemy CV lit, your battleships take some shells, some shots, maybe you get a follow-up strike. It kind of changes the interaction for that end of game full health CV that's just been fucking sneaky the whole map. Kind of like that
Yeah. So
asshole
this is
conqueror that's on
basically.
the one line that just doesn't move while he's chucking shit 25 kilometers away, not using his health pool for anything.
So this is basically a speeding up the game by leading to a decision by killing one CV or the other.
Well, I don't know
Um,
about speeding up the game. Just it means that at different sections in the game, the options for what to do in regards to the carrier change. Do you just heavily deal with, well, he's deplaned, so fuck him, we can ignore
okay. So
him?
so
Do
I
you
would.
just go
So
for the
how
snipe? Like,
my mental model of this is, if you look at an average game, there's one point where one team won, right? So where people go like, okay, we killed the DD, we killed the 2 DDs, we killed 2 battleships, we got all the caps, game's over.
Sure.
and most likely the game is over, giving some incredible comebacks and whatever. But generally speaking, at one point in the game, the winning team is decided. And other games have machine learning. They can say, okay, now it's 75% win chance for the one team and 25% win chance for the other team based on composition and what happened in the game. And what this change would lead to is just um, lead to a faster point where the game is decided, and to lead to stronger swings in the win percentage for one or the other team. And my only argument would be, I don't understand it, why losing planes would reduce the hit points of the hull, and whether to decide whether this is a change you like or you don't like. And my gut feeling is, as I said, I don't understand why this would be, and I don't think this is a
Yeah,
um,
I think from
this is the
like,
right. This is in the current state of the game. I don't think this is the point here where I would look for balance changes.
yeah, I can
To put it,
definitely agree that it would be weird. It would be
yeah,
very odd, and that in itself makes it strange enough that I think it would be a hell of a turnoff for people. Um, I think as a game, like a game kind of balancing or game concept, it could be interesting. Like if you instead look at this in terms of like, if you magically morph warships into a fantasy game, and you're looking at stuff as though there's like flying chariots and magical creatures and shit. Well, the thought of,
okay,
a magical creature that slowly decays as it attacks, okay, sure, that makes sense in the head. But when you think of, why the fuck would I lose damage when I'm not being shot? Like, what?
yeah,
So that would be
yeah,
very strange. And there are a lot of people that they play warships because they like not the simulator aspect of it, but the setting. And as far as the setting is, I think it would be awkward for people to like, why does this not make sense? Why is this not realistic in any sense? Like people hate that radar goes through rocks. Why? Because realistically, radar doesn't go through rocks. That's why they hate it. If it was just a magic detect spell, well, it's a magic detect spell. But if you're going to tell me it's radar, don't fucking lie to me. Radar doesn't go through rocks. So, it gets a lot of blowback. And yeah, I think
yeah.
the
And
ship health
radar
thing
is an
would
example
be would be
where
weird.
a mechanic reduces the complexity. You just go like, okay, everything in 12 kilometers is lit, no matter uh, whether it's in smoke or behind an island or behind another ship. It's just like you can see everything in 12 kilometers. Like
Okay,
your
so
pixie dust or your magic dust just lightens up everything. Um, and you could argue it's like, well, that's the way it works, and we have an arcade game, and we balance around this. And that would be one point where I would say that killing or damaging the hull in this kind of setup with this kind of balancing opens a can of worms, and there would be 20 different things you could balance and you could change in the game, even using your suggestion with a plain health, green, yellow, red, or whatever. Even using existing technology or existing information and just present them in a
yeah.
understandable way would ease up the game and the understanding of the game for a lot of players and a lot of people.
Okay, so let's take a little
So I
step
don't like
aside. I think
that.
I think we've been probably talking for about an hour, maybe a little over an hour. God knows I can
Okay.
talk, so I mean I can easily go for who knows how long. Um, if you have other ideas that you wanted to bring up, let's go ahead and keep those, squirreled in your pocket. But a long time ago, Viktorovov, if I'm saying his name
Yeah.
correctly, said, "I've got a question I really want to ask." And I said, "Why don't you just like write it down, keep it on your back pocket?" And if Viktorovov is still here, if you want to throw out a question, or maybe we could take a question or two from chat just to kind of riff off of for a little bit before we dive back into maybe some stuff that you had in your back pocket.
Sure. Great idea.
So let's see. I can look at users in chat. I know how to do that. Although it has to let me do it. Is he still here? He is still here. Question is if he's still like alive. um, and also if somebody in chat did have something that popped out at them during the course of our back and forth that they just wanted to expound on or ask a specific question on. We can take questions for like a little bit, take a few questions, kind of derail, and then we can go back to what else there. Okay. Would you enjoy CV if they took a bigger support role, like for example, healing or smoking ships? So I will kick that to our guest. Would you enjoy CV if they took a bigger support role, like healing or smoking ships?
Um, few things come to mind. One is with the inclusion of submarines, this might even be something that CVs could do, just dropping depth charges, for example.
Mm-hmm.
My contention or the points where I think that would be hard to balance and hard to explain to the player base is if you give CVs smoke or radar or any sort of uh, usable cooldowns
Hydro buoys.
that directly lead to kills of DDs or other ships. So that would be really, really, really hard to explain to the player base why the invincible CV now gets radar or more visibility and whatnot. So um, I would again argue that you open a can of worms, and you would probably be better off balancing other aspects of the game before uh, starting with that.
For
But I would,
me, oh,
from a playing perspective, I'm in other games usually I'm a support-ish kind of player, and I would like to have a sure. I mean, if you had a support flight that could drop smoke or any other kind of depth charges or any other kind of consumable with a just a little with a limited amount of consumables, that might be something um, to think of.
yeah. So I play support in League of Legends. I've often played with D&D. I've played tanks or healers. When I played World of Warcraft, I played a healer for the majority of that time, as well as a tank. So, like, for me, taking a role that allows me to perform a team function actually is very appealing to me, and is one of the reasons why I enjoy CV so much, because I do play the CV in terms of support. I have derped around trying to do some damage farming when I was trying to hit a record or something in the TNG clan, because like they did little inter-clan records. I did also do some damage farming for about a week, I think, to try to get the CV icon thing, like the maximum CV icon. But I did wonder, because there have been ideas floated around, like what would a support carrier be? Well, a support carrier would probably have a deployable smoke. A support carrier could have hydro buoys that maybe have a limited range, that are basically, it's just like it's a hydro report from an area. Maybe the planes have to inhabit the area or something to relay the information. I don't know. But like if you were just kind of trying to fundamentally come up with a something. So DD smokes on a flank. Well, you fly your little planes over there, you drop a hydro buoy, and that hydro buoy has like hydro out to 2 kilometers from the central position. So the DD is now revealed in smoke and may have to run, but they're only hydroed for 2 clicks.
And he will die.
Well, potentially. It depends on where he's positioned when he smoked. But could you do things like this? And I believe the answer is yes. If you have a CV like that, most likely that CV will have only one type of plane that can provide damage or no planes that can provide damage, which could be awkward if you go against a damage based carrier versus a, well, support based carrier. The damage based carrier is going to bring in 40 to 120,000 damage. And if you're support based carrier, how do you mitigate 40 to 120,000 damage?
Report our CV. No damage, Gigi.
Sure. But I did wonder, like, for instance, how could you balance heals? Would you basically you drop some supplies or something, care package, and you go over to a thing, you drop a care package, you basically give them a repair consumable. So they have one
How I
use of
would
a
go
repair
about this
consumable.
is maybe use offer CVs a flight slot. So instead of torp bombers, you can use um, one or two different support-ish kind of planes and just have a CV and see how it works out. And see see what people choose. So you could run your, let's say you run Shokaku, but instead of the AP bombs, you go for your smoke planes, and they have a 3-minute cooldown. So you fly somewhere and you drop your smoke. It stays there for 2 minutes, and then you can recall your planes because that's all they do. Or you can use your planes to scout stuff and like fly around and get shot down. But generally speaking, every 3 minutes you can use one of your flights to drop a smoke and see how this works out. I'm not sure whether having a full support CV to start with would be a good idea,
Oh,
to be
I
honest.
bet they could do something like this. If they had a CV, and again, like I'm not grounded in realistic terms. I don't have the World War II background for all this stuff. I'm just a game player. What if they had a CV that had, there are three different types of attack planes, but their planes did maybe half as much damage as a comparable CV of the same tier. However, they had multiple consumables. So if you flew your rocket planes over to something and you did a support drop or whatnot, you go over, you drop a consumable over top, the consumable parachutes down, gets collected by the ship. Because we've seen animations like that in the various little like October, Halloween modes and stuff, where like a little parachute with a box
Mm.
will come down and then you get a consumable. Like clink, you get a heal consumable, or clink, you get a smoke consumable or something. So if your planes do reduce damage, but maybe each flight has one heal, one smoke, one hydro buoy, then you it becomes not just about damage, because you're going to do less damage in general because you have reduced damage capabilities on the planes, but you now have some consumables in a way that like a cruiser might have consumables. That being said, I mean, you're limited in it. You only have maybe three of each. People would probably complain immediately that, so you're going to give planes the ability to hydro anywhere on the map at any time?
So at this point, you
But,
don't have you don't have hydro, you have radar buoys, because where's the difference,
well,
right? It goes through smoke. Um, as I said, I like the idea, but
well,
I would
I just
test
think
it
I just think if they
in.
were able to do something on the form of like Harry Furious working, if they were able to do something where it's not, because my personal like how would you make this happen would be, I imagine that the three planes you have is you have the healing doctor planes, the sonar buoy planes, and the other planes like where that's their only function, the only thing they do, which I just don't think works because it doesn't click. But if you kind of treat it like a cruiser, for instance, where a cruiser may have a weakened set of guns because it has an aggressive set of consumables. Well, what if you could do that with carriers, where you had carriers that had weakened planes so that you have less damage interaction with ships because you have more of a support or interaction through consumable use? Then it would just come down to how do you balance the consumables so that they're able to be useful, be effective, but kind of overcome, so that it comes out so that it comes out to a good battle contribution effort. So if you're against a
Yeah, but I would,
Shikaku that's
as I said,
kicking
I
out
would do
60
it.
to 80,000, are you able to provide like 40,000 in healing and 40,000 damage because you're a quote unquote support CV?
I would do it, as I said. I would prefer to have it in like not running in the to start with a hard-fledged support CV, but just go like, okay, this the gimmick of this CV is, so instead of the torp bombs, he can equip smoke, and every 3 minutes he can set a smoke instead of torps, or instead of AP bombs, or instead of whatever, and just see how this works out. But my fear would be, um, well, one thing I would throw in is to say, to think about whether you want stuff like hydro or something um,
I think the easiest thing would
like
be if you did like a
like
heal
anti-radar, for example. So if you drop something and there is no radar in an area,
chaff.
that's actually something that
Oh,
the British did.
that would be hilarious if you could, if your DD gets hydroed in a cap, or sorry, radared in a cap, and you fly your planes over and drop a chaff consumable or something that breaks radar for like 25 to 30 seconds over the DD. Oh my god.
Yeah,
What? How much would that change a destroyer's view of their of planes? Like, fuck. See, oh wait, no, I like that one. That one gives me chaff. Yes,
That's
I
a
like
good
that one.
one.
I'm glad this one's here. Yes, I like this. Please. That would be
Yeah, so
remarkable.
what I would try to aim for is to start with a reactive kind of consumable and not with an active. So if you drop a hydro somewhere, a hydro buoy, this is a can of worms, right? It's like you can drop a radar and the DD will be lit for 20 seconds till he leaves the radar if you drop it correctly, right? And um, that's as good as a radar. But
Yeah,
if you could prevent something, if you could prevent hydro, or if you could set up fake ships, for example, right? They show up on the minimap, but there are no ships if you zoom in, for example. That could be, you could use some really funny um, tricks and disguises or protect your own DDs from radar, for example, and even heals. But I think heals are the most boring.
here would be
Or,
some. Here would be something fun. If
yeah,
if we did the hydro buoy and the hydro buoy floated on the surface and was an actual asset that you could see in game, but only had like a visual range of say 2 kilometers. So essentially, well, maybe 2.5, but well, okay, we'll say 1.5 to 2 kilometers. Say so you drop a buoy, and it plops on the surface. It floats around, and it provides like 2 minutes of hydro in an area. So essentially, you could drop a buoy on a small pass or something just to kind of guard a section of the map. And if a ship is caught in the hydro, then he can just shoot the buoy and blow it up as it becomes revealed or something 20 seconds into
yeah,
it's being active. So it might scare a DD out of smoke, then he blows it up and goes back into a smoke if it's a US DD that has long smoke cooldown. Um, or, as people approach the flank, they could choose to kill the buoy prematurely before they get lit. But then again, maybe shooting makes them lit. Those are things that could be interesting and still, I feel, are at least grounded enough that it would be an intuitive back and forth.
yeah. And as I said, with the advent of submarines, submarine hunting could become a CV job. You get
Absolutely.
depth charges, and somebody goes like, "We take care of the DD, but there's a submarine somewhere. Go, go hide and go find it and kill it."
Yeah, I have to wonder how
But
they would do depth charges.
but then
But
you would have the submarines whining about CVs being oppressive, and the Ds aren't no more whining. So
I do
yeah,
think it would be fun because again in the game, like it gets really awkward if you start having like 7 plane types to choose from on the deck when you can only fly one at a time. So to an extent, you have to have some either alternate mode or some kind of consumable based gameplay to allow a ship or a plane type to kind of have multiple function slash roles. If you're gonna have some kind of depth charge plane, then I think you'd have to, like, say with the torpedo bomber, you would have to have almost either an alternate mode or a consumable that when you use the consumable, the planes would start an attack drop and then, you'd fire and then the planes would leave and go back to the carrier, pretending that they brought, I don't know, depth charges instead of torps that time. But it could be done, but I'm curious as to how they would have to implement that in order to make that work.
so what you would notice is something about balancing. The higher the level, or the more skilled the players are, the more important information becomes. If you're in a really low tier, and if you have not so good players, it doesn't matter if you spot the enemy battleships, because they will show broadside no matter what. But as the players, or the player base, or the players in the match get better, offering information becomes far more valuable.
Sure.
And dropping a hydro and just making sure that nobody can use this pass can lead to all your battleships turn bow in, and suddenly they uh, take 30% less damage, or even shatter or deflect
Yeah, or even if you just
the
drop the
shots.
hydro buoy between where the suspected DD is and the battleship,
Yeah,
because then they might actually have some kind of torp detection at an
yeah, yeah, yeah.
advanced range because you
So
performed a support
these
function.
CVs would be really, really bad in low tiers, and they would be really, really controversial in higher tiers
Just
where
just depends.
information.
It just depends on the consumable though. Like
Yeah,
literally, if you did something
agreed,
where you
agreed.
could do this, like a tier 4 version, if for some reason you gave them these, which you wouldn't because tier 4 is a training tier, but
Yeah,
if you did for whatever reason, you would just nerf the shit out of the consumables to appropriate levels, assuming like you're
yeah.
really trying to make it balanced.
But
Um,
still, the point is that the higher the level, the more important information becomes, and
yeah, O seven
that's
made
something.
O seven made the point that in clan battles, they didn't even care if their CV shot. They didn't care if the CV ever attacked anything. All they wanted the CV to do was just light things because they had players that could land the shots and just get the hits and get the kills. And that was more important to them than whatever damage, 40,000, 80,000 damage the CV might bring. So, yeah, definitely. When you get to the higher levels of play, just having the information is of so much more possibility, so much more capability in the hands of those players that can execute on it. Yeah, absolutely. Definitely agree.
And my hypothesis, and that's something you would probably have to ask this kind of players or these clans, is if CVs become integral part of high tier clan wars, um, do they spec against it? Do they use consumables against it? Do they use captains against it with +1 fighter plane and whatnot? So um, do they just? I mean, that's a hard question. Do they just whine because it's change and they don't like change, or did they try to play around it and
Well,
did they still
from the
feel
game, from a
the
guy that
pain?
likes game design and interactions, I mean, I love that the CV brings more interaction to clan battles. And I know it's still controversial. And again, I want to have a really good talk with somebody that's been doing clan battles for the last, 5 seasons, 8 seasons, whatever, so that they can help me to understand what it is about the clan battle without CVs that is so important, so special that a CV robs the experience of that, and maybe have a little back and forth about how I see it, how they see it. I don't know, but I think it would be informative. It would be a lot of fun. Okay, so I think we answered that question. As far as would you play a support CV, I absolutely would. um,
Me too.
me personally, I am a support player. I mean, literally, when I joined into the first hurricane season, I spent I I don't know, 8 to 15 hours going over replays of every match that we had with the lead strategist guy, just asking, where should I be at this time? What do you need to be doing in this set of conditions? What am I supposed to be doing here? And I treated it kind of like the jungler role, where by minute 3, I should be around X. By minute 5, I should be doing this. By minute 7, I should expect this. And if it doesn't happen, then be doing that. Like, I built a priority tree on how I'm going to be interacting and helping my team achieve things, rather than just like, whatever, man, I'm a CV player. I'm just going to run around and shoot shit. And I'm not saying that's I mean, there are CV players that they literally just run around and shoot shit, and it works for them because they're really good. But I do think that learning how I was able to interact with my team in a more support-based function, knowing what the surface ships are trying to do, and helping facilitate to getting that done. Especially because I'm a CV main that doesn't necessarily know what a surface ship sees, so it took me a long time to kind of get that view, which has helped me a lot as a player. But it was a lot. I don't know. Anyway, okay. So chat, do you have any other questions that you would like to kick out for us to riff on before we continue with Zornbringer's list of stuff that he kind of had in his back pocket? Give you probably about a minute or two if anybody wants to kick out another question in the chat. And while I give a second for the chat to do the thing, I am going to run to the restroom. So I'll be right back.
So great, I can take over now. I use this as a shameless plug for my search for a clan that's interested in having a up and coming TV main in their ranks. If you are on the EU, just shoot me a message and we talk. I'm looking for a clan. Besides that, okay, what specific tactics does Zorn use with the Graf Zeppelin to take advantage of the faster planes? Okay, what I think Graf Zeppelin is, first and foremost, I think it's a unique CV in the respect that it's really a vulture. So you are really good at, you have fast planes, and you're really, this means you're really fast at reaching any point in the map, and you can contribute a little bit of damage via AP bombs and via torps. So what the Zeppelin, kill steals basically. So what Zeppelin does really well is killing off retreating or single heavily damaged um, um, enemies. And other CVs do it as well, but you got 220 knots on your torps and on your AP bombs, and you can use that as an advantage. Another thing is the secondaries, although they are sometimes a meme and meme-ish. If you spec for it, you have 9.4 kilometers secondary range, and if a DD is, or even if a light cruiser is stupid enough to enter the 9.4 kilometers range, you can put out a lot of damage to it. And I mean, like, kill it. And you lose maybe half of your health or even more, but you can kill enemy ships that come too close. In a normal game, this is not something that happens each and every game. I would say maybe every 10% of the games or every 20% of the games. But when you are able to use your secondaries, they really, really do work, and
Yeah,
they
yes, they
really,
do.
really hurt. But it's not in every game, so on the balancing side, you are a little bit weaker than probably all the other tier 8s if you cannot use them.
Also, your
And
detection is
yeah,
terrible, so they can see you coming from like a mile away.
yeah, but if you're in let's say you're 15 minutes in and there are only 3 ships and you start to cap because you can, there's nothing, not much that an enemy can do against you, because if they come close, you sink them just with your ship or with your hull, and that's and it has a pretty good AA. So if you ever get close to enemy aircraft carriers, you can really hurt them and neutralize them with your AA. That's really rare, but it happens. Another thing is the AP bombs are a little bit trollish at, at times, and I would like to see them buffed by either using 3 flights with 3 planes and dropping 3 AP bombs, or making the reticule a little bit smaller, so that if you can really aim well, you have a higher chance of doing more damage. Um, um, and I think your main HE planes, HE rockets, they have 40 mil penetration, which is pretty nifty, and it can really damage cruisers if you
And
target
battleships.
superstructure. And battleships,
Because it
yeah.
actually deck pens the USN battleships too,
Yeah,
which is pretty kicking.
so you can do 7,000 or 8,000 damage if you land a lot of rockets, and you can turn in and do 2 attacks, even 3 attacks sometimes, and that's 15,000 points of damage is a lot on tier 8. It's not that much on tier 10 if you're low tier, but if you're up tier, and that's a lot, and it can really, really help. But one thing about the torps, you should use the torps, or I use the torps looking for a target, and then you start using them at 7 kilometers or 6 point something kilometers in, and then just going
Burn
one
in, yeah.
straight line, just drop them and then speed out to another 7 kilometers, and then turn around and do it again. So you just negate a lot of AA, and really annoy somebody.
Yeah, I when he first told me to start the torp runs at 6 kilometers, my first thought was like, if I'm just going full speed, the flak is going to lead correctly and just shoot down the planes. So this is not going to work. And I went into a training room, and the flak did not lead correctly at 230 knots. So I just zoomed through it, dropped the torps, and during the little drop animation, there's a brief invulnerability window, and I would come out of the invulnerability window outside of the 3.5 kilometers. That's most of what people use for mid-range AA. So you burn in, you fly through the mid-range and short range so quickly, and then you zip over the ship and reconnect to your planes with the camera by the time you're out of the mid-range on the other side. And then you can just complete your zoom, whatever, spin around and come in for a second shot if you have enough boost left, or if you have a consumable. I mean, it just changed the way that I interacted with the planes, whereas I was using them where I would slow down to try to get the aim to finish off, and I'd just be bathing in AA, getting shot down, and it just totally screwed the Graf Zeppelin, because the planes just can't deal with it. So that changed the way that I played it, and it made so much of a difference for me, which is great.
Yeah, what you would do is look for opportunities to find two ships in a. Your planes are really fast, so you don't mind flying a little bit longer to get a good broadside torp drop. So don't drop in an angle. Just take your 5 seconds or 10 seconds to get a better position, and then drop a full 3 torp broadside on battleships. That's something you might want to do with the Zeppelin. And speaking of torp drops, I've seen some even good players play the Franklin D. Roosevelt, and what I noticed is they just turn in and like circle the planes.
Yep. Yeah, they can turn like they're British torps. British torps can do that too.
In close AA, and I was like, geez, I would play it more like a Zeppelin, like drop your torps and then just fly straight out like 7 kilometers away, and till then you have maybe a few seconds left, and then turn around and look for another target, and don't just even stay in the 5 kilometer or 4 kilometer range of many ships. Just
I think
play it as.
I think people are still figuring out the FDR. It's going to be a little while till that one's solved. Although there's some testers, I think, that have like hundreds of games in it. But until we get to see what the hell those people actually do, it's still going to be a bit of a mystery till people solve that. Oni Baba had asked a question: why does just about every USN CV start with fighters? You probably mean rocket planes. The reason for that is the USN has the slowest strike planes. Their torps and bombers are the slowest option because they tend to hit pretty heavy. So that's kind of how they're balanced. They have a decent amount of health, so they roll in, and they roll in kind of slow, and they hit like a hammer. So why the rocket planes? Because the rocket planes are the fastest, although probably not with the Germans tech tree now. But I do think that in general, the USN rocket planes are the fastest ships or fastest planes at the tier. So they make excellent scouts. The rockets are also very accurate in that, like, you don't have to lead them like you lead torps. You don't have to try and do some aerial ballet like you do with the bombs. Although the rocket reticle was nerfed. So if you're going out with the rockets, you get your scout faster. Your planes are more speedy. So like if you suddenly find yourself in AA, you can run out of it very quickly. And if you happen to trip over a DD that's separated himself from the pack, well, you're in rocket plane, so you can rocket the DD. So it works out really well for the US to do it. So that's definitely why US rocket planes are the scouting first plane choice.
In the German line, I would scout with torps, and on the Zeppelin, you scout with the AP bombs because they are 220 knots fast, and you are really, really fast with scouting.
Yeah, you're super fast, and if you get locked into an AA trap, you can double click and slingshot out of the AA trap. You can't use slingshot offensively on the carrier, but you can use it defensively to just get away from AA. You can do that. Okay, so we took a few questions from chat. I don't really see any other questions, or maybe I just missed them. but I don't think I saw any more. So, did you have any other topics in your back pocket that you wanted to pull out and talk about too?
Um,
Slingshot does continue to work. It works on the the Indomitable. That's the only carrier that can use Slingshot in an offensive fashion. That's how the carrier was designed. They made that mechanic continue to work with the Indomitable, but it was removed from all of the other carriers by adding like an 8-second cooldown after your shot finishes. So you could Slingshot through enemy AA to get to where you want to attack them, and then you have to just spin around in a circle for 8 seconds getting shot in the ass until you can start your attack run. So slingshotting has been removed, but you can slingshot to get away from something and use the immunity window to try to, save some health as you bail. Anyway, okay, so sorry, just finishing up that question because he has to follow up. What you got?
I think something where we disagree on is the upcoming or the planned aerial visibility change for DDs and cruisers.
Okay. Well, I wouldn't say it's upcoming because they've never stated that it's going to be a thing that they'll do. They did it on like a testing. Yeah, they did
testing. They tested.
Yeah. So they
and
do.
I would argue this is a stupid idea and it's not going to work. And
Aww.
It would be. It would make DDs and probably cruiser more or less give them a huge chunk of immunity against CVs if they're out on their own somewhere. And I think it's a really bad idea. And I think it matters. And having played DDs, I would argue that this is not the biggest problem. Especially, I think the reticle change on the on most carriers made it harder easier to dodge carriers as a DD, and I think this change is not needed and not helpful for the game.
Yeah, I do struggle with it because there have been so many changes to pull pressure away from destroyers from what a CV can do. The reticle change, they obviously made an aerial detection change, although that was probably before I started playing, so for me it was just always that way. But evidently they made that change to try to give them more maneuverability in terms of what to do, although a lot of destroyers didn't realize that just turning off their AA actually mattered. So, there were some people that just, unfortunately, they said, "Hey, I'm over here, shoot me." Okay, that's overpowered. How did you find me?
Use my 2 machine guns to show you where I am.
Yeah, that was kind of silly. As far as making it even more aggressively small, if they were to implement the changes, I mean, they don't have to just do a blanket 50% reduction. They don't have to make it like literally 1.5 kilometer something. They could just reduce it to 2 or to 2.2 or 1.8 or something where it's still technically like you can kind of see it. It's just that unless another DD is spotting it, or unless it's radared, or unless it's lit in some fashion, that you're firing blind. And do I think that's a bad thing? Well, as you said, you disagree with me, so I do disagree with you. I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing I think the goal of that proposed thing was to make surface detection the primary means of detection of the detection game, of interaction, and start to pull the detection interaction back from the planes and allow. What could the planes do? Well, the planes can give you advance notice on where shit is. They just have to fly to where the shit is to see it, not see it at range. They will take losses for it, so they'll trade planes for information as opposed to being able to see sometimes from outside of somebody's AA range where they can visually confirm something without trading resources. They're only trading time. And by changing the aerial detection, you alter, you start making vision has a resource cost in addition to time. Damage has a resource cost in addition to time. It's not that you're making the CV just arbitrarily run out of planes because you rammed up the AA, but you are adding more of a cost in that interaction, because in order to spot something from an aerial detection point of view, you have to be within its AA range. if they turn off the AA until you light it, then they just turn on their AA and then they shoot you.
There are, especially with the Ds, there's the point that even if you can guess where the DD will be and you start your attack run, even the fine tuning after the reticle turn green can lead to can even lead to you not hitting at all, or to really large
Yeah, and
changes in the
that happens
reticule.
even
And
now. Like on a DD with 3 kilometers. I mean, if they just keep their
yeah,
AA off, you might not see them.
figure some DD with 1.8 or 1.5 kilometers visibility. I think I would argue that even the game is not fast enough to paint them fast enough. So this basically leads to being invisible, or you see them when you're past them.
That could be the case, but at the same time, there's nothing preventing you from having rocket planes ready and saying, "Hey, DD, push this. I'm with you, bro." So the DD goes, "Okay, I'll take this fight." And they start pushing a flank until they trip over the enemy DD. And now the enemy DD is lit by your DD, and you see that destroyer, and you can come in and get the hit. Like if the aerial detection was less than what it is now, they probably wouldn't have had to do the reticle change. They probably could have just left it as it was, so that if you had a friendly ship spotting it for you, then you could be able to impact it the way that you used to. But
when watching the King of the Sea tournament, I would argue that having 5 raiders or 4 raiders and hydro and whatnot on each and every ship, this offers so much visibility that your CV lighting up in a clan war or in a professional setting, that your CV lighting other DDs doesn't even matter that much, because if every ship has a radar and you can stack the raidars and you go like, mine's down in 10 seconds and next radar in 10 seconds.
But to counterpoint on that, if your ability to light the DD doesn't matter, then why do you need it? So if you have so much radar that it doesn't matter in a competitive setting, then why do you need to be able to light it with your planes? What requires you to have that function? I mean, technically, if they change the aerial detection, that makes CVs much more focused in terms of efficiency and the ability to just do something focused on cruisers and on battleships. And they can adjust what the damage that a CV can do for cruisers and battleships, and they can adjust what cruisers and battleships can do in return to planes appropriately. I mean, the as far as from a game balancing perspective, if you have one thing that only affects one thing, it's really easy to balance. When you have one thing that goes into like 20 different situations and you have to factor all of them, it gets pretty hard to find that middle ground.
Another gaming experience is if you're totally helpless against something, and if there's something you cannot do anything against, something, it's not very fun.
I know, like being a battleship that's being hunted by a DD when you have nobody that can spot them, nobody that can do anything. So it's like, do I just YOLO this bitch and die? Like, yeah, I know, I got you.
Even if you're a battleship and a CV, and if you're not able to reliably spot the DD, it's not fun. And I think people underestimate this aspect, that even if you can do nothing against it, it's not very good from the gaming game design point of view. That would be, please go ahead.
I do want to point out that I personally, obviously there could be a competitive player that hopefully will come on and we can have this discussion, but I don't personally have like a feeling that clan battles were just totally and completely fucking borked because CVs existed. I don't think that. Even with the aerial detection, what it is now, I like that you have more of an idea of where the enemy is deploying. Because in some clan battles, you end up going against a meme comp where they're just like, they send 6 ships roaring off to one direction, and you split your ships up. Fuck, it's 3v6. Your guys get slaughtered, and then you get wrapped and killed. Like, as cool as that is on a surprise motherfucker note, it doesn't feel very. It doesn't feel very competitive, as much as, well, I guess I'm fucked now.
So you take out the Zerg rush.
Yeah, when you take out a little bit of the randomness by allowing some, at least the concept of these have been spotted. We have an idea of what's going where. Let's try to formulate our plan and use this, let's try and use our skill set to respond to the unfolding situation. I like that. I actually think that's a good thing in a competitive situation. So I like that a CV brings additional vision. I like that a CV can potentially punish a destroyer that isolates off to get a great flanking angle for torps, but he's taking a risk that when somebody sees the torps, they're going to tell their CV, "Oh, he's over here. Look for him now." And then you catch him, and he doesn't have any friends. He can pop smoke or something. Maybe I like that it gives you these additional interplay situations.
There's a Stalingrad behind an island locking down 3 of our ships, and they banned the daring, so we cannot pencil torp, so there's nothing to do. But if you're a CV, you can sacrifice some planes just to get the cruiser or battleship or whatever moving, or just take it out.
Yeah,
and I agree that having counterplay is good for the game, and it's a good gaming experience, and it's a good watching experience, and it's good for the game itself.
Yeah,
that's something I would argue.
The only other thing I could think of if they did, and this would be kind of fucking with the detection system, is what they tried over multiple patches was reducing the range that CVs could see. So like you used to be able to, in your little fighters or something, you could see 20 kilometers out. Kind of like a battleship can see, 25 kilometers on the map. So if there's shit lit all the way on the other end of the map, they can probably still see it on their screen. As opposed to if you're in a destroyer, you might have like 12. So if there's stuff on the other end of the world, you can't necessarily see it. Well, they slowly reduced by kilometer after kilometer all the way down to wherever the hell it is now. So there's often instances where I just don't know. I can't see health bars. I can't see positions. I can't see anything other than I see an icon on the map because my team can see it until I fucking fly over there. I could actually conceptually see if you changed, instead of the aerial detection, if you lowered the detection that a plane could spot a surface ship to like 3 or 4 kilometers, but you still left the visual range for information you can see to something that's, like if it's surface spotted, you can still respond to it. Because in that sense, the biggest thing, if anything, there's one big thing about the aerial detection change that I really like. It's that right now, I can just drop a fighter somewhere and it will see shit as it comes forward because you can spot things outside of its AA range. And I can fly to the other side and I can spot both deployments or all 3, deployments in a random battle very, very easily. And I would not be against having it not be so easy. Even if there was some form of consumable that allowed me to see at a longer distance to spot, at least it would be tied to a consumable, but to just give me the ability to freely and easily see both deployments, to me feels a little bit strong. And again, I just told you, I like that you are able to give your information to your team to make better tactical decisions as opposed to just wandering into a raffle stomp. But I do think there could be at least some kind of interplay to at least make me have to lose some planes for it. So that I'm bleeding some resources on that. I think that would be nice.
Maybe some tweaking, but I would argue that in general the ranges are pretty okay-ish right now from a random player. I play a lot of random, so
sure.
From that kind of perspective, I cannot speak for high-level clan battles, but I would think that the view they might have could be tainted by irrational hate for CVs. I'm not sure.
Possibly. I mean, I do have to admit, kind of like when I talked with Eraser, Eraser wanted the game to be, the AA to be harder, the flak to be more impactful, the this to be that, he wanted the game to be elevated to a state where it challenged him while he's in a situation where he's one of the best players in the game. And the challenge level, I don't think needs to be increased, but I could be okay with the resource cost in trade for information or in trade for this or that. You could make more of a resource trade, I think, and not make it punishing to an average person, But, just make it so that if you're going to do something, it costs a little more than time. Time is
Yeah, right
very
now it costs
valuable,
you
but a
right
little
now it
more.
costs you consumable.
Yeah. So that being said, I actually do think CVs are in a rather balanced place. I know people disagree with me on that, but I've seen where they were. I've seen what it's been like all through the back and forth and stuff, and I have to say that I don't think they're so miserably oppressive that it just destroys the game. Obviously, the game has not shut down. It's been up for a year and a half with CVs in it, randoms or otherwise. So I could there be tweaks? Absolutely, there could be tweaks, but I don't want to say that where it is just awful, because I don't think it's awful by any means. But I think there could be small improvements in the area of maybe adding a little resource attrition for some of the information you get for free.
Yeah, I agree that they're a fun class to play. Playing CVs made me play better against CVs using cover. Like different ways of angling your ship or your destroyer, so you're not impacted by them.
Mm-hmm.
I think they're in a good spot, and I would agree on using small changes and gradual changes here and there, and not going overboard with reducing the visibility by half or whatever. But
Okay.
then again, I mean, who are you who are you balancing for, and what are you balancing for? Are you like, is it the loud minority? Is it a so what's your goal? And we started, I think, in the beginning of this of our conversation, we talked about it. Um, do you want to balance for the top 1,000 players so that they feel everything is okay? Do you want to balance for the better player so think everything is okay and they feel good playing the game? Do you want to balance for the chunky middle? Um, and even if you say you balance, I mean, what do you mean by balancing? Is it what metrics do you use? Is it win rate? Is it average damage? Is it experience? So you could talk about it
I
quite a
think
lot. And yeah,
I think because I've been trying to chew on this one, because that did get mentioned way back in the early, like an hour and a half or so ago. Um,
jeez.
I do think that I do think it's a good idea to balance the game around quote unquote perfect play. Will you find perfect play? Is it often going to be perfect play? No. But I do think it's good to balance around the idea of, let's make the game function as perfectly as possible. And then if people make errors or random factors get involved, well, they make errors and random factors get involved. So like with Dota, you balance with quote unquote perfect play, or at least the best that you can attain. And then when it goes to the general populace, maybe they misuse this character, maybe they misuse that character. But at least you know that the interactions should be, if used correctly, are at a balanced state. So I do think that, yes. And I think when Eraser talked about balance, at least for AA, he thought of balance as like challenge. He thought of balance as attrition, like serious. If I'm going to do something, I need to be hurt for it because I know I'm going to do a really fucking good job and I'm going to hurt them more than I get hurt, kind of thing. So he was looking to like ramp up the difficulty, not the balance. He wanted more difficulty. And I don't think that's correct. I don't think you balance on a professional level by making everything super difficult. Like in
There are
terms of
two there are
Dota or
two
something, like if you do a skill shot, there's a lag time between when you shoot something and when it hits. And the slower it goes, the easier it is to dodge. And to sit there from maybe an Eraser point of view, where you might look at it, well, I'm so amazing. You can make this incredibly slow, and then it's incredibly hard to hit, but I can do it. And that would be good for me. Yeah, but who the fuck else can do that? Versus making it consistent, or making it, to where the average player can use it, but making sure that the damage or the interaction is still balanced enough that it's not overwhelming, it's not overpowering, and it kind of works out. So for me, like, if they were really concerned about CVs, for instance, They could tune up the AA a little, they could tune down the damage a little if for some reason they felt it was just out of fucking balance. I don't personally believe it is, but I think if you balance on perfect play and you feel that
So
CVs are
so
just
few
a little
things to
too strong, you can trim it down some.
I agree. So a few points to pick up on is um, actually I think it would be a good thing to have. It would be really nice to have a developer going for having a manifesto and saying, well, this is our goal, right? So this is what we want to do with the game, and this is how we define balance. And you could use win rate, average damage, average experience, whatever. Each metric is only a proxy because balance is really hard to measure actually if you think about it. And
Sure.
using a certain proxy um, will always skew the the way you look at it, right? So using win rate for the top players might be a good indicator, or maybe the best indicator, or maybe it's not. And this is something we could talk about, and I would love to have players talk about it in in a more data driven or even more conceptual way, and not going, well, it, CVs are not balanced and they're stupid, and go like, okay, what kind of aspect don't you like? Is it the win rate? Is it the damage? Is it the amount of spotting ribbons you get? What is it that you feel is too strong, and then work from there. Um,
Yeah, I think they
yeah,
have
having a developer also having open having all the data available. I mean, in other games, each and every played game is you can get the data via an API, and you could do your own statistical analysis about it, and that's something you could do with that would be really great if we had it here. So if you go like, okay, the daily win rate or the pick rate is one thing, and okay, now I remember what I want to say. And the second or third thing is um, random. Actually, there are two parts to balancing League of Legends and Dota. One is the abilities of the heroes, and the second part is the picking and banning phase. So even if you have heroes that are really really good and combinations that are really really strong, you have enough bans to effectively um, um, reducing the amount of your own incompetence, to put it that way. So if you had more bans in this game, uh, even having a really really strong ship that would kill each and every other ship, it would allow you to get rid of it in a esport or professional setting. And having a system with bans and picks would really allow for would really solve a lot of um, balance issues that this game has right now. So, for example, if you have two bans for each team, and you're really, really adamant about not playing with CVs, use your bans on the four tech tree CVs, and you're good to go, right? So, this having picks and bans and being able to only choose a hero once, just like a Highlander kind of game mode, would really help with imbalance. And that's something I noticed when, as I said, watching King of the Sea and each and every team playing 4 or 5 Petropavlovsk, and it was just boring,
yeah.
and
I,
it was really annoying to
I,
see.
I
And
think they could do that, but they'd have to redesign how you queue up. Like right now, when you queue for a division, you pick your ship, then you hit let's go. You wouldn't have that option. You'd have to go into a screen where you do not queue up with a ship so that you can pre-do the bans and stuff so that those are established, and then you can start picking your ship. So it would start looking
I
a
agree
lot
that
like
would be,
Dota, a lot like League. So it'd be very
yeah, it would
different
be a
from
different
what,
game mode.
yeah, it would be very different from what the average player knows in terms of random battles. I don't know if Wargaming would do it, but it would be really cool to see outside tournaments do it. And there's no reason why Wargaming couldn't support, like they do COTS, support a league that allows something of that nature, which COTS already does with the ban system and stuff.
Yeah, but it's done in chat, right? When one side goes,
Yeah, it's
our
done in
first ban
chat
is
instead of
this.
having like a cool interface and stuff. Sure.
Yeah, but on to have a, let's say, a working prototype or minimal viable product, so to speak, would be using chat to say like, our first ban is this ship, our second ban is that ship, our first pick is this ship, and you could just tinker around with the process, and you could even use a website just to get everything done. So if you really wanted to try out different game modes and different aspects in this game in a professional setting, it would be really easy. Just as whoever, as you said, organized the point system, the point-based system. I
Yeah.
mean, if you really want to, just
I,
do it
I
and
would like to
try
mention
it.
that on Twitch, I happened across farming sim. There's a farm sim game, uh, farming simulator something. I don't know, 2019, 2020.
Okay.
And as weird as this may sound, there's 3 people on each team, and they ban some tractors because they know the performance values of these tractors. Like they ban 2 each on each of them bans 1, and they each ban 2 total, so 4 tractors are banned, and then one of them picks a tractor, the other one picks, so they have their little pick ban phase, and then they run out and they grab machines that can like harvest wheat and things that can turn the wheat into bales, and they it's literally, I shit you not, it's a competitive event, and I cannot describe to you how mesmerizing it is. Like, there's no way in hell you could have convinced me that there would be a competitive farming game that would literally make me stare at the screen for hours, but it did. And it has a pick ban phase. Like, there's nothing to say that World of Warships couldn't if they wanted to add that. Like, they're adding a new version of ranked. They could absolutely do kind of a pick ban phase, which could be really interesting, to be honest. Also, well, yeah, it could be really fucking interesting.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
As
But it
far,
would need
go ahead.
it would be easier if you had the support of the developer and you had the monetary interest behind it to back a transition into any kind of esport or watchable, better viewable sport. But if you just if all your support is two or three guys handing out codes, that's not leaves a lot on the players and the on the fans to make rules for themselves. But I would really like to talk to somebody about what he thinks about a Highlander pick banning kind of version.
I, yeah, sorry, I just had to link the farming thing. Like, I don't remember the name of what the giant grant game. No, I don't know. Whatever. Anyway, sorry, farming sim thing off topic. Just um. Whew. Okay, my mind is starting to frazzle out. uh, I think we've gone maybe 2 hours 15 minutes, something like that. So
Oh my
obviously,
god.
I have gone longer, but I know we have gone for a while, because we're at 3 and 3 minutes 30, or sorry, 3.5 hours into the stream, and I think I played like 3 games. So probably gone on something where the 2 to 2.5 hours at this point.
Just one more thing. Okay.
Sure.
The change in the current change in the not only in the reticule but in the
Dispersion, the rocket stuff.
no, how you move the reticule. I think this is I didn't understand it. So you before the patch you used the keys like A and D to do the hard turns, and you could use the mouse to um, do the small adjustments in
Sure.
flight without the large without the reticule getting larger and so on, or not la- way larger. Um, it occurred to me that maybe this is because of um, console games, because they needed a way to have CVs turn just with one mouse, just with the mouse, or just with with something to steer it, and maybe this is the reason they changed it. What do you think?
Hmm. Maybe.
Because
One thing that I can tell you, like, okay, so way back in the day with like Doom, because I've been playing games a lot. Uh, back with, Doom, Duke 3D, stuff like that. Back when you didn't have mouse control, you didn't have fine control. You had left and right. And I guess they may have had strafe. I think strafe was around then, to where like you move sideways. But when you were trying to like turn your gun left or right, often, if there's any kind of distance, you would just turn too far. And to deal with that, there was some kind of built-in, kind of sensitivity. It allowed for flawed aiming. So like if you aimed a little to the left, a little to the right, the game kind of figured out he probably wants to shoot the dude in front of him, and it would assist you and allow your bullets to go at the intended target. You didn't have to be fucking pinpoint accurate. But eventually the mouse pointer became big somewhere around Half-Life, I think, because I was new to using the mouse in a first person shooter back when Half-Life came out. That was like the late 90s. As people started getting access to this really fine control, you could get some really, really accurate kind of stuff. Well, so making this combination of keyboard and mouse to be like brute force and fine measurement, I think works out pretty well. It was weird in the beginning, but I learned it pretty quick. And one of the things that I don't necessarily know if they needed it for consoles. One of the things that you have on consoles is a feedback sensitive joystick. So if you move the joystick a little, it just kind of uses like logarithmic movement. A tiny bit of movement means really slow. A lot of movement means a lot of movement. So
Yeah,
as
but
people
they have
learn,
two parts. They have one part where it's really where it gets stronger and you get more turn, and the more you turn out, the less turn it gets. So it's not really.
oh,
I don't think it's a well designed feature.
well, I haven't
And
played it. I haven't played it on consoles. It took me a while to learn it on the PC, but eventually when I did, it kind of feels second nature. Although sometimes it
yeah,
fucks up, which is really awkward because you're like, "Why aren't you working?" And then that strike gets just totally borked. But it doesn't happen that often.
yeah, I'm still struggling with the new system. I don't like it. I like the brute force and the mouse for fine tuning way better.
Mm.
And I think, as I said, the reason I think they changed it is because if you just have a joystick on a console, that's the only way you could do it. Just if you push hard, you do a hard turn. If you just do a little bit, you just do a small turn. But having both in the game for mouse and keyboard really, yeah,
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 there are times where
doesn't
I
work.
turn with the keyboard, and because of the way that I happen to be looking at something with the mouse, as soon as I let go with the keyboard, it counter turns back. So I'm like, shit, and I'll have to adjust. So occasionally I troll myself, but it becomes muscle memory after hundreds of games.
Yeah, I'm not
Okay,
on the stage yet.
well, my mind is starting to chug, and I have had actually quite a lot of fun. We did stuff that we didn't necessarily do in the other broadcasts, where we had a conversation about potential balancing concepts, kind of riffing on how could we change this, how could we do that. So hopefully, thank you for the sub, Borla. So hopefully that happens more, because when I envisioned this, way back years ago, when I thought, oh, it'd be so cool to have a podcast called The Balancing Act, I was literally thinking about how to balance like heroes in, oh my god,
League of
the
Legends,
Dota clone in Blizzard, that Blizzard's Heroes of the Storm, like
Heroes of the Storm,
yeah, just kind of talking
Heroes of Neverword.
yeah, Heroes of the thing that slowly disappeared into nothingness.
Yeah.
It that to me just seemed fun. It seemed like it would be interesting to really banter back and forth about it. Not necessarily to solve a problem, but to kind of riff on the problem, understand the problem a little more, and throw out some solutions, which I think we got to do. So it wasn't just talking about what it is, but also maybe what could be. I really enjoyed the conversation about support carrier stuff. I mean, obviously that could go much deeper, but it was a hell of a lot of fun. If you want to continue, or like if you'd like to maybe, if you got more to talk about, you're welcome to come back. But I think 2.5 hours, my head is starting to get fried. I think I had too much caffeine, so I'm starting to get wiggly.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna go ahead and call it here. So
Thanks for having me.
absolutely.
I hope I didn't bore anybody with my uh, new player kind of perspective. And I also liked. I really enjoyed talking not about um, the intricate details of different patches, but taking a step back and just like see the game from a more um, from a broader perspective, and maybe from different perspectives at all.
Yeah, which is very
If at
important.
if at any time you have questions about Graf Zeppelin, just let me know, and I would like to help somebody play it. I watch you, give you a few hints maybe. Enjoy doing that.
Woot.
Um, Besides that, thanks for having me. Great, I had a great time, and yeah, I'm getting tired as well a little bit.
Alrighty, well, so thank you to Zornbringers for coming on and giving us 2.5 hours of talking about stuff and having